Welcome to Out of the Box from Hudson County Community College. In these podcasts, we bring you timely discussions about education, people, programs, events, issues, and solutions that affect the education and enrichment of the people of Hudson County. I'm Chris Reber, president of Hudson County Community College and your podcast host. Joining me to discuss our Student Poet Laureate program, our Assistant Professor of English, Eric Adamson. Eric?
Hi, Dr. Reber. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Wonderful having you. And Eric developed the annual tradition that we're going to be speaking about today. And joining us also is Natalie Akel, the college's inaugural Student Poet Laureate.
Hi, Dr. Reber. It's so wonderful to be here today. Thank
Natalie,
you for having me.
It's absolutely wonderful having you. So thank you both for being here. Thank you all for watching today. And I have to say, this is a discussion I've really been looking forward to. There's so much to talk about here. These are two really inspirational people. Eric, I'm going to start with you. Eric, you've been on our faculty since 2015.
That's right. Yeah, so I started in 2015 as an adjunct, and then in 2016 became full-time for the first time. So, yeah. Wow, it does.
Time flies.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been incredibly wonderful for the college to have you here. Eric is a gifted writer, a great teacher, I've come to know, a faculty member who really cares about his students and who really contributes to the college in so many ways.
It's funny because at the beginning of my time teaching, first of all, I felt like, I have no idea what I'm doing. What am I doing going into a classroom? Can I really do this? But also, just feeling like I was just kind of, I felt like I was doing the minimum, right? I was like, I'm just skating by because I'm trying to figure out what's happening. And it added so much more depth to my understanding of being a teacher to actually really get involved, to transition from that, it's a new job, I don't know anybody, I'm not sure how well I'm doing, to just kind of like building that confidence to be like, I should just do things, right? Like I should try things. I should be, enjoying this experience and growing, which basically as soon as I was full-time just started, because it was like, okay, now you're not teaching one class at this school and then going to teach at other schools. Like your career is right here. So.
And that kind of parallels the experience of our students, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, they'll often say, I came here and I was just going to attend classes and then go do all the other things I have to do in my life. And then they get involved. And it seems to be transformational.
Yeah, I think, we talk a lot about imposter syndrome with our students and the idea of like feeling like maybe you don't belong at college. And every time we have that discussion, I always think, yeah, it's not just students, right? It's like as a faculty member, you might feel like, should I really be doing this? Like, is this who I am or like what I'm supposed to be contributing to this group? Am I contributing the things that are really valuable? Or even feeling like this pressure of like, did I make some mistake that is going to mess things up? I think for me, being a teacher, I worry about that on the level of like, if I mess up this class, have I like ruined a student's trajectory in life because they didn't learn how to properly write a thesis statement in my class? But realizing that like the whole conception of teaching somebody is much bigger than that, right? It's not just like, did they learn this one specific thing from your class and now they don't know it? But there's just so much more, including the community aspect, which I don't think you always see in that beginning part of teaching.
Right, absolutely. You're a smart guy. So you did your undergraduate work at Brown.
Undergraduate at NYU.
At NYU, and then your master's degree at Brown.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about how you wound up as an English major teaching English.
So it's actually, so I'm not like in the very technical sense an English major. So I went to a school at a school at NYU called Gallatin, which is individualized study. So essentially you kind of create your own major. And one of the things I liked about that was that they spend a lot of time making you justify why you're studying what you're studying, right? You can't just throw together random classes and say, that was my major. You have to justify, you have to have this big presentation at the end. So I studied poetry and the history of science. Because for me, I saw a particular connection between those two things that I wanted to investigate further. And so then when I was finishing up undergraduate, my parents were like, you should be a teacher. And I was like, no, I'm gonna be a writer and that's it. I'm not doing anything else with my life. And they were like, okay, but you should also look into teaching. And I was really insistent, maybe I was rebelling against my parents. I was like, no, that's not going to be what I do. So then my roommate at the time was applying to Brown for their graduate MFA program. And he said, why don't you just apply? You know, if you get in, it's like a funded program. You won't have to pay, so you don't have to worry about money. That's just how their program works. And why not try? And I thought, you know, whatever. I'll just send it in. Who knows? And I really didn't have a kind of direction with where I was going to go. But I got the acceptance letter, and I was like, I guess I'm going to graduate school. So I went there, and part of that program was that we had to teach. And teaching was just it was so much fun. And I think part of it, I'm actually happy I taught those classes there because we taught intro to poetry workshops. And so it was like all the good parts of teaching without too much of the stressful part of teaching, which is often the grading, the organizing. So it was like, it almost was like tricking us into having like the perfect teaching experience to make us want to be teachers. And it was nerve-wracking at the time because I was 22 and I was teaching undergraduate students, many of whom were the same age as me. And yeah, it was just a sort of strange experience to be doing that. But I liked it so much. I always felt like I was building a connection with my students. I felt like I was actually imparting something to them. It was
So you connect learning to real experience. You engage students around their own life experience.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, one of the things that I've been thinking about leading up to this podcast a lot is how to talk about what that looks like in the classroom. Yeah. Because I don't think it's a very, it's not a very tangible problem to deal with, right? It's like, what does it mean for students to bring their experiences to the classroom? And that's so abstract, right? It's like, well, of course, everyone brings their experiences to the classroom, but does that actually translate into something useful in the academic world? And sometimes the answer is no, right? Sometimes it's like, well, this experience just doesn't line up with what we're trying to learn, so you can't necessarily use it. But one thing that I've been trying to sort of articulate better is how we can take those kinds of experiences and what students just already have when they walk into the classroom and use that to transform the classroom into something else. Yeah. And I struggle, again, to describe it because I think about sort of the way that a lot of academics is built around kind of like one type of student, right? Yes. It's like you have the student who's studious, they show up to class on time, they do their homework on time, they ask questions when they don't understand, they use all the resources at the school, they go to the library and use those. And that's great. Those students are great. But there's so many other types of students. And I think that even our system of sort of judging those students and how well they're doing is based around, do you match up to this kind of idealized student? And I think bringing their own experiences into the classroom is sort of like the first step in leveling that playing field, right? Which is like, okay, you might have more knowledge because maybe you went to a better high school or you had a private education, but what you bring, even though you don't have those things, is equal in value. Yes. And so how can we merge those two things? And I think that's why teaching writing is so interesting because it really can, I don't know if it works this way in math, but I think you have to know some of the equations and the theorems in order to make the math work, right? But in English, I can say, you know what I'm actually asking you to do is to write about your own experience and tell me why it's important.
So this is a great segue to Natalie. Let's talk to Natalie for a little bit. Natalie, you're an inspiration for so many reasons. One of the wonderful things about working in a community college is the rich diversity of backgrounds and experiences that our students bring. And your experience is different from what many of our students' experiences look like. Mm-hmm. And I want you to tell us a little bit about your experience. Let me just say Natalie earned her bachelor's degree at the University of Vermont in 2017, and now she's a student at Hudson County Community College. Tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you here.
Absolutely. Well, I'll go back to high school because that's really when my love for poetry blossomed. I was lucky enough to go to a visual and performing Arts High School as a creative writing major, and I had a wonderful teacher there named Dr. Gretna Wilkinson, and she really instilled a love of poetry in her students, and also a love of the community that surrounds poetry and working with other poets and reading each other's work. So from very early on, that's what I was immersed in, and spoken word was always the form of poetry that I was in, that just came to me and that I naturally wrote. And then so when I went to college at the University of Vermont, it was a pretty easy decision to be an English major. That just felt right to me, and I used to say, you know, I want to be a poet. That's what I was like, I'm going to be a poet. I don't need to be a teacher. I don't need to be anything. I'm going to be a poet. And then by sophomore year, I realized that poetry was this amazing part of my life, but that there were other passions of mine that I felt called to embark on. So I started taking more social work classes and health classes, and ended up working more in the social services realm, but still always to use poetry, you know, after a hard day when I got home and witnessed something maybe really intense going on with a client of mine, I could write a poem about it, tuck it away, and move on. So then I moved back to New Jersey in 2019 and was working at the DA's office in the Special Victims Unit, and just decided one day that there was just something not right in the role I had there. So I decided to quit that job to embark on being a doula to support people who are pregnant and parenting, and also to go back to school for nursing. And I think COVID really influenced that decision, seeing everything going on and feeling so helpless and so at home. And I really wanted to be a part of the fight to keep people safe. I think no matter what, that's always what's guided me, and that's what has brought me here to Hudson County Community College in the nursing program.
Phenomenal. So you're earning your nursing degree, and what's your career goal?
My career goal is to become a midwife. So that would involve becoming a registered nurse and then going back to school for quite some time and going back for my master's for midwifery.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So.
And what role do you see poetry playing in now and in your future career?
You know, it's kind of funny. I always say I want to go back and get my master's in nursing, but when I'm retired, and I want to go back and get my PhD in poetry. I will always write poetry, but I think that how it will come into my life is undefined and always present. Mm-hmm. It is always my go-to thing. That's what I do to understand and to process and to heal. Mm-hmm. And so it's just always, even if I don't become a midwife or become a stockbroker, whatever I get into, poetry will always be the heart I wear on my sleeve.
And our college community has come to really appreciate how gifted you are as a writer and a poet, as our student poet laureate. When you were in high school, you won a writing contest. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I won the Scholastic Gold Key Award, and it was a really lovely experience. We actually were honored at Carnegie Hall, and I remember my parents were driving me to the event, and they were on the phone with Doc, my professor from high school, and my dad, who just always has a funny joke, a corny joke, he's like, "Doc, we're driving around New York City. How do we get to Carnegie Hall?" And Doc is like, "What is her father talking about?" And then my dad is like, "Oh, I found it. It's practice, practice, practice. That's how you get to Carnegie Hall." Those were his directions.
I love it.
Very silly. And so, yeah, that was a beautiful experience. I think I was 16 years old, and to be sitting in this beautiful hall and not really understanding the gravity of what it means to be sitting in Carnegie Hall for your poetry.
And let me share with our viewers here that some of the folks who preceded you in winning that award were pretty impressive writers, weren't they? Like Truman Capote and John Updike and others. And so we are so delighted to have you here. Eric, you talked earlier about how important it was for you and how meaningful it was for you to become really involved in this college community, beyond just teaching the course, engaged with students. And wow, have you ever become involved? You're a member of our President's Advisory Council on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which has become a really important part of the fabric of this institution. You also, of course, are a member of the All College Council. You're a member of a recently renamed committee. Tell us about that, if you would.
Yeah, so the National Poetry Month Committee started in 2017, which at the time, Elizabeth Nicias was the dean of the English division, and she said, we need to do some stuff for National Poetry Month, April. And she said, let's get some people together. And kind of nothing really came of it. It's like, I think we sort of like passed out poems to people on the street, and that was really it. Mostly we just didn't really get involvement. So the next semester, I asked Dean Nicias, I said, can I just lead that effort, because I'm really passionate about it, I think I can do it. So we gathered maybe 4 or 5 people. We actually had one really successful event, which was Karen Galley brought a poet named Claudia Prado, who taught a workshop on poetry in Spanish to the students. And of course, nobody knew how it was going to go, but the response from the students was just so phenomenal, and it really inspired us all. In fact, students were coming to us saying, I use Spanish for communication. That's how I talk to my parents. I'd never thought of it as a creative language before. So it's just like this transformational thing. So after that, we were like, okay, we can do more. So we started recruiting a little bit more. We started putting a little more effort. At the start of the pandemic, I decided I don't want us to do National Poetry Month anymore, because it's too restrictive. There's already too much going on in April. It's going to be hard for us to get attendance, basically, at events. And why not? We can have poetry all year round. So at that point, we decided, we're going to kind of recruit. Like, we're going to go out and be like, listen, you may not be super interested in poetry, but it's an important part of our school and academics. So would you come help us put on some things, get some perspective, even from people who aren't that attached? So that, worked out pretty well. We started to put on more events. We started to get more attendance. We put on workshops. I believe you came to one of the workshops my friend Becca Ansorgi did. So we had great attendance. It was starting to build momentum. And then, of course, the Poet Laureate came around, which, so that was again, right at the beginning of the pandemic. So basically, again, Karen Galley, one of the things, I'm going to mention her a lot because she's the co-chair, I don't even know if chair is the right word anymore, but co-leader of the poetry collective with me. And she often says, like, I don't feel like I'm doing enough. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, you take phone calls from me every day where I just like ramble on about stuff, and then you sort of like chisel it down. I've been describing us as like puzzle piece workers, and that like we both have strengths that just happen to complement each other. But anyway, so we were talking about people proposing stuff with Amanda Gorman, the Youth Poet Laureate who read at President Biden's inauguration. And I didn't know what to do. People kept saying, do something with this, do something with this. And I was like, I don't know what. You tell me what you want us to do. And I just asked her, I said, what if we just had a Poet Laureate at Hudson County? We could just name them every year. And she sort of gasped on the other end of the phone, was like, oh my gosh, we have to do this. And in the beginning, I really thought it wouldn't work, because it's not that I didn't think people would be supportive. In fact, I knew you would be supportive, which was like this light at the end of the tunnel. But I kind of thought maybe it will happen, it will sort of fade away, or it won't be a very big deal, or it will be kind of like an unofficial thing. And so Jenny Pooh, who was the director of our libraries at the time, she said, okay, well, why don't you write up something that explains how it's all going to work, that it's going to be this fair process, that you want it to be this official thing, and then send that to the administration, Dr. Reber, Dr. Jones, right, just everybody, and say, we want your endorsement. So I was mentioning earlier, so we wrote up this thing, we explained it all, sent it to you, and I thought, okay, a few days will go by, maybe, I think an hour after I sent it, you responded and were like, absolutely, do it, make it happen. And so that really launched a whole different aspect to the committee, which was, now that we knew this was going to happen, we really, really needed people from all over the school to be a part of this group, because you can't say this poet is representing the school and then it was selected by 5 English professors, right? So started reaching out and explaining to people okay, we want you to be a member of this committee. Our pitch was the commitment is low, right? There's not a ton of work, we don't meet all the time, but your main responsibility will be that when we get submissions for the Poet Laureate, you have to read them and vote. And that way we're making sure we're getting this broad perspective. So yeah, and after that essentially happened, we were like, no more committee. We got to change our name to the Poetry Collective.
Collective, which is great. And I'll tell you, it's such a pleasure as president when someone brings an idea that's so well conceived and so easy to say yes to. And so Eric and his colleagues, members of the collective, others, really put together what is now going to be a tradition of having a competition in the spring and inviting students all across the college to submit their work, and then choosing our student poet laureate. I sometimes say laureate, sometimes laureate.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not actually sure myself, but
both sound good. Yeah. But anyway, we select then a student to be the poet laureate for the coming year, and Natalie is our inaugural pioneering student poet laureate. And Natalie, in this role, you have been invited to share your work in all kinds of different settings, right? Inside and outside of the classroom. You just read a poem at a Board of Trustees meeting. On Thursday, you're going to read a poem at our annual Foundation Holiday Gala. But I know you're also reading to kids in the community and in a lot of other venues. And I'm wondering if you would be willing to read one of your poems now.
Oh, I would absolutely love to read one of my poems now. Let me pull out my poetry gadget here. The poem I'm going to read is called Open Window. It's a spoken word piece, and I think it takes you on quite a journey. I hope. So this piece is called Open Window. Clean it all, the lamps, bathroom stalls, shake the dust, scoop the muck. It's made a mess of us all. Watch me miss my stop. Go the places I thought I forgot, Monmouth Beach and Forest Hills, searching for long night and cheap teenage thrills. We were so young, running that wild. We wanted you to watch our shine. Go mild, out of style, we could never. And in the driver's seat you sat, filming records of us all, our high-pitched crackles and regretted writings on the wall. I don't know if I'd answer, if you'd call. You never call. I depended on you for shoes, food, and pretty things. I don't know who has to come clean, but it better not be me. I've kept this locked up too long. Like an attic with dust that will make you sneeze for a week. I'm that disease. It runs in my family. I've tried to break the cycle, clawed my periwinkle bedroom walls, but it always leads me to the same place in these hollow, decaying halls. The wallpaper is chilling. The paints crack under your feet. The floorboards whisper omens like you better now retreat. But I keep on going further. I don't dare turn to my sides because I know there is a window somewhere, and in that window there is light. I don't know if it is daytime or if I'm doing this out of spite, but I know I love myself enough to climb into the night, to pull out all the shadows, to walk along the curb, to say goodbye to this place, apologize to any lilies I've disturbed. Saddened over time, I walk past the graves. The names are all weathered down, so I blow a kiss to each, and I try to find my way. Around my neck there is a locket with her graceful, ageless smile. I cut fuel-speckled flowers for my vases, and I know I am her child. It took so long to get here, but now I can be still. I look out the window to the house upon the hill. It's been vacant for some time, sealed with boards of cherry and oak. The door is no longer open, but there is one window that is never closed. But if you climb there today to see what you could find, there would only be a blue jay's nest and a trail of braided vines.
Wow. That is beautiful.
Some poetry snaps going on here.
Eric, any
you.
comments about?
You know, I have to say, I love the poem. And sitting here recording a podcast as you read it, I just have this feeling, it's like when you look back and you watch like archival footage of like these great poets, like reading at some small thing, you're like, oh, this was when they were, young and they weren't well known yet, and what this rare footage. And I thought, are we a part of this right now? Like, this is so amazing. And I have to say that whenever I've heard you read, I think I have two sort of reactions. One is like my very selfish reaction, which is like, oh my gosh, the Poet Laureate is like happening and it's real and I feel good about this thing that we did. But the other is that I think you really do stir up like genuine emotion in your listeners. And I remember at your inaugural program, right, where Dr. Reber sort of officially crowned you the Poet Laureate, that I think it was it was virtual, right? And I remember looking in the boxes at other people, and your friends were there, and as you were reading, they were snapping, and they were cheering you on. And I just thought, hearing you speak today as well, it's like how you, like, not only is your poetry so amazing, but also that you're like so steeped in the poetry community, right? Like you have a community of people who appreciate it already. And it just feels so fortunate that we get to like share at the larger community, this thing that probably was shared in the smaller community before, right? But now it's like we all get to have like a glimpse in, which is fantastic.
Yeah, well, I will say my smaller community is sometimes just my best friend, and I'm like, you need to hear this. So I just want to say that what you see in me and the encouragement that you've given me from day one to right now is so helpful and powerful for me, because a lot of times, like, it feels like you see something in me that often I can't see in myself. And I think that the fact that you've created a classroom and a space and a collective where people can come together and create and be silly and learn, I think is incredible. And I think you just do such a great job doing that for your students and for people who aren't your students too.
Oh, thank you. It's, I think it's one of those things that, again, probably comes from a bit of a selfish place, right? Which is like, I want to be around people who are feeling good about the things they're doing and feel encouraged. I think about, in many ways, graduate school was not like a pleasant place to be as a writer, because it's really, really harsh criticism coming all the time. And sometimes that criticism felt like it's criticism for criticism's sake, right? And now in my classes, I had a student just 2 weeks ago, we were reading this poem, and she said, "Professor, is it okay for me to critique this poem?" And I said, "Sure, you can critique whatever you want." I said, "But I think we should move past the idea of like critique and more like there's a work of art in front of us, right? It is what it is. It's okay if you like it or you don't like it, but it's not very productive to talk about trying to change it or making it something it's not, or what's wrong with it. Rather, we can just talk about like what it actually is, right? The expression is happening, and that's wonderful and amazing and academic.
Yeah.
Right? It's not just your private life. We're in school. You can talk about your feelings as this like academic subject, right? Which I hope is what creates that.
And Natalie, so it's obvious that as Eric has, in your own words, really had a positive influence on you and has inspired you, you're going to be doing that. You already are, but I know throughout your lifetime you're going to be doing it through your caring profession and your supportive work with mothers, and through your poetry. And you know, one of the beautiful things about education is you realize that not only is it life-changing and transformational in the moment for the students, faculty, and staff that are here right now, but it has a ripple effect. That transformation, that inspiration gets carried on in the lives of our students and ultimately in the lives of those they touch. And you are both such inspirational examples of why this college is such a special place. Eric, you have described writing in a way that actually compares it to candy versus full meals. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, so I think there is a really important discussion that happens about the importance of poetry generally. This is usually where the conversation starts. It's like, why does poetry matter? Why do people keep writing it? And essentially in my mind, it's sort of split into two different things, right? Is why is it so important to focus on this like written word and to have it and to keep doing it? Is that I think that when we're thinking about any kind of communication or art, or maybe anything, right? But specifically in this case, the word, that there's some aspects that are like candy, which is the kind of experience that is sort of in the moment, it happens right then. You don't necessarily remember it or take it with you, or at least the specifics of that experience. What you're more remembering is like the sugar high you got from the candy, right? It's like it pumps you up in this moment and then it's gone. And then there's other kinds of work that's like fully cooked meals, right? Now, those are healthier for you, right? Maybe they last longer, but the other problem is that it takes work, right? Both in the preparation, but also the consumption of it, right? It's not very easy. And I think poetry is often that, right? It's not instant gratification. It's something that it asks the reader to do a lot of work, right? And that work is not always pleasant in the sense of like the sugar high from candy. Sometimes it's, you know, the work of self-reflection or the work of really trying to understand what another person is trying to tell you. And this is just my own extension of this, which is that when people ask me why I write poetry or why I like poetry, I tend to think of myself as not being able to express myself very well. And that I have to put a lot of work into trying to make sure I'm expressing myself in a way that people understand. So for me, poetry, that's why I like poetry, is because of that work, because I'm trying to tell somebody, I feel this way, and I can't articulate it. So I'm going to organize language in the most complicated way I can that I think is accurately gonna help me express myself to you. And so in that way, it's like, we do have all these other important things, right? I think in my classes we talk about like rap is often used as this kind of metaphor. Mm-hmm. It's like, you might have a rap song that's like a party song, right? You go, you dance to it, it's great, it's fun, and that's really valuable. But you also have rap that's about like social justice, and that we're not comparing them, right, to like try to weigh them against each other. We're just trying to understand them as different, right, and valuable in their own ways. So I think, yeah, that's my candy metaphor.
That's nice. I love that metaphor. It's a beautiful metaphor.
Yeah.
I feel there has to be a dessert in there too, but
yeah, right.
That's when we're hearing that you read your poetry so beautifully.
Yeah, I think as you were reading it, I was thinking about how much is packed into so few words, right? And that I thought, oh my, we need this podcast to be 4 hours, you know, because yes. we need to process what's happening here. But I also enjoy that feeling, right? Of like, okay, it's not easy to understand what Natalie is saying on the surface, and I'm excited to do the work to get to know, right, what is really being said here. Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. You know, we need to do another podcast. There's so much more that I'd like to be able to talk about. Your translation project using poetry to help English language learners. Natalie, you're a first-generation American. Your family came from Lebanon and from the Dominican Republic, like so many of our students. The work that, Eric, you're doing to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion college-wide. Hats off to both of you. Thank you for being such vibrant members of our community. Natalie, your future is so bright, and we are so proud to have you in the HCCC family.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to be a part of that family.
And we have a way of closing these podcasts. I'd like to ask my guests if they could describe their Hudson County Community College experience in one word. What would that be? What would your word be, Natalie?
My word would be possibility.
Possibility? Eric?
I've been thinking about this all podcast. I think the word might be collective.
Collective.
As a whole.
Possibility and
works.
collective. And mine's inspirational, and that's certainly appropriate for today's conversation. This has been truly inspirational. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us for this session of Out of the Box. We hope you'll visit our website, hccc.edu, and share this podcast with your friends and family. And please stay safe and well.